The changes in the education sector, the way we assess students, the rise of digitalization and artificial intelligence, the changes in the learning environment, and many other unusual and controversial questions. We will be examining them one after the other in this channel. My name is Daniel Wiśniewski, and this is Education Chatter. Welcome to Education Chatter. This is Daniel Wiśniewski, and this is your channel on education. I'm here with a very special person today, Rose Luckin, a professor from UCL, who is an international expert in the field of artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence in education. Rose, thank you very much for accepting the invitation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I know that you're currently in Taipei, in Taiwan.
Indeed.
Can I ask you, what is that you're doing over there right now?
I'm talking to the Ministry of Education here about artificial intelligence in education because they're very interested.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I caught you actually on a business trip, didn't I?
Indeed.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks a lot for finding the time anyway, and for calling in from far away. But right now we're going to hit it. I wanted to ask you, because honestly, most people, I think, have no idea how can we really use artificial intelligence for education. I mean, we hear quite a lot about artificial intelligence changing business, changing the way we produce, changing the things we think about commercial activity, but we have no idea how we can really use it for enhancement of learning. How is it already used nowadays?
There's a long history of using AI in education, from early days of very basic intelligent tutoring systems, as they were called, to provide adaptive instruction and tutoring rather than teaching. And that's gone on for many decades. And so we have AI that can be used to personalize instruction. But much of that was quite expensive and therefore not used by huge numbers of people. But then there are other ways of looking at the way AI is currently used in education. Yes, there are products and services, and there are many of them. Most of them have this focus on personalization, adaptivity. All of this is very helpful. But there are also the more general purpose AI tools that you can see being used in education. So, for example, speech to text can be very, very useful. Dictate something, it appears as text, very handy. Everybody listening to this, I'm sure, will be using AI in some ways as part of their life. And some of that naturally spills over into education. If we use something like Google to search for something, we're using an AI, but we may not realize we're using AI. So AI has been used, is being used in education for many years. Some of it specifically built as AI in education tools and applications, some of it general purpose AI that we've adapted and are using in education. But I think what's very different since the autumn of 2022, when ChatGPT and some other generative AI tools first started to appear, is that those AI tools have made something powerful that uses AI available to anybody who's got an internet connection. So whereas some of the more sophisticated AI tools were quite expensive and not being used by everyone, we now have ever more powerful AI tools readily available
for
to
everyone.
Anybody.
Right.
Exactly. And although they are free to an extent, and they won't remain free forever, I'm sure, we are now in a situation where many, many more people are using AI than they were, say, a year ago.
Right. Yes, it's actually, I think before we started recording here, we had a little chat with Rose to kind of get to know each other a little bit and make a background a little bit. And so what you told me is that you've been working on this for 30 years now. And especially when it comes to, generative AI and the use of AI, it's fairly recent, at least, let's say, the consciousness of this challenge or of this new way or the use of AI in education is fairly recent. You've been working on it for 30 years. You say that we already are using AI. In fact, everyone who is using Google is using AI. We can use it for the sake of communication, where we can use, I don't know, mailing lists that automatically update you and update parents, for instance, about their children's attainment and grades and so on. So that's obviously is already there. Now, how is the AI transforming teaching? Is there any way that the teaching will change? Because I recently spoke with a friend. She works at the Ministry of Education in Portugal, and she said, "Look, it's actually the tools have been changing. A long time ago we used to use the chalk and the blackboard. Then we started to use the whiteboards, and then we were drawing on this. Then we started to use the PowerPoint, and the presentations all over the place. Now we are using, let's say, AI. Is AI going to transform the way we teach? Because my friend says that pedagogy and the teaching itself didn't change much. The tools did. What's going to happen with AI? Will it actually transform teaching, or it will be just the same in another tool?
That's such a good question. I think it will change education, but the process of teaching in terms of building the right relationship with somebody who's learning, I don't think will change. But I think the way that skill, that expertise is applied may change. And I think what we teach is likely to change as well. So I think your friend's right. The tools have been, are, and will continue to change. But I think with artificial intelligence, there's something qualitatively different in comparison to previous digital technologies, because artificial intelligence strikes at the heart of who we are. It strikes at our intelligence. And therefore, we have to think very carefully about what that means for our intelligence and how we continue to develop our intelligence. So I think there will be a change in education. I think education will be transformed for good or for bad through AI, because it's a powerful technology. There's a huge investment of money in developing ever smarter AI that is going to transform the world of work, and inevitably that will transform education. Mm-hmm. The way that happens is what matters. And that's where I think we need to help educators become much more engaged in the discussion. So I think from an educator's point of view, yes, it's important to acknowledge that change is going to happen, but that doesn't mean that your skill, your expertise, that it is what you do as a teacher is no longer going to be needed. Quite the opposite, actually. I think it'll be needed even more. But I do think what you teach will likely evolve, because we'll need to have much more emphasis on helping people develop, so students, learners, helping them to develop really sophisticated higher order thinking skills that the AI is not able to develop, so that we continue to evolve our own intelligence and become smarter and smarter and smarter. So I think that will impact on what we teach and the nature of education. But I don't think it undermines or radically shifts the actual process that is that building that intersubjectivity between teacher and learner that's core to learning taking place. So I think things will likely look different, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the core process of teaching and learning will be different. Do you understand what I mean, Daniel?
Yes. You see, some time ago I had a similar chat here in this channel with Patrick Newell. Patrick Newell is also an expert on the future of education. We had a discussion about the future of education. You can see, for those of you who are seeing this channel, you can see it on our channel as well. So you can see the link just in the comment. But, and he mentioned this, that it's something that strikes me, and I think that you'd also trying to say it here, is that we will be able to really find out about what we can really teach and how we can really use the AI, as long as, or as we will be able to see that first we have to figure out what will be the relationship here between us and the AI. What
Yes.
will be the AI doing for us, and what will be our role in that world with AI? So that's, he says, we have to figure this out first to see what we teach and how we teach it. Because otherwise, if we don't have this relationship between AI and us figured out, we will be kind of, blind people, or walking in the dark, really. So we will not know the direction of it.
I think that's true. Working out what we want the relationship between artificial and human intelligence to be is what matters the most. I think he's absolutely right there. And it's also important because it relates to the risks of offloading inappropriately what we as humans do to AI. And we don't want to do that. We already know from research that our memories are changing because of the way that we use search technology. Our ability to navigate in the world is changing because of the way we use GPS technology.
Right.
We need to be careful that if our cognition changes because of the way we use AI, that it changes in a way we're happy about. If we lose the ability to do something because we no longer need to do it, it should be a planned loss, not an accidental loss. Because once we've lost it, it'll be hard to get it back again. So that all speaks to what you're saying about the relationship between artificial and human intelligence. What do we want the AI to do for us? And how do we want to interact with it? And what are the things that we should always do and should not delegate to AI? Because you can be very sure that there will be plenty of companies out there saying, oh, you know, that thing you don't like doing, that thing you find really hard, makes your brain hurt, don't have to do it anymore.
Right.
We'll do that.
We'll get to that.
And that's very, very tempting, isn't it? And but that may not be the right way to go. So we need to think about these things very carefully.
When you're telling me this, I reminded myself of a memory from my childhood. When in 1990s, when I was a child in Poland, I remember that when we were driving somewhere with a very, rather a poor car, because in 1990s there were not many families that were able to afford a very nice car. So it was a poor car, and we were trying to drive 400 kilometers somewhere, which back then was an expedition, with all the roads and so on. I remember that, my father was driving and my mother was having a huge map over there and trying to, okay, you have to turn there, and then you have to turn there. And I remember that we've been lost a few times. Nowadays we use I don't know, we use Google Maps or anything like this, and we sort of, and you're right, myself, I do not have really a memory for places, so I use Google Maps to go everywhere, and to such a degree that that I do not remember the way back to places I regularly visit. So in the past, people who were driving, you would be recognizing these places, and by default where to go. Whereas now, with the use of the AI and the use of the Google Maps and so on, you don't have to. And this is exactly what you're trying to say, is that we need to see what we can delegate to the artificial intelligence and kind of agree on it. So as it is
exactly
loss. And you see, just to close this, I think this is like the first risk that you already kind of named here, but I wanted to ask you, what are other risks that AI can bring to education? Because this planned loss of certain abilities, that's one, but what else is there that we can actually lose?
I think there's a huge risk that AI is very good at giving the impression that it's more intelligent than it really is. So I think there's a huge risk that we get sucked into believing that an AI is more intelligent than it really is. I think that's a real risk. I think there's also a risk that we don't recognize the importance of this moment in terms of two areas where each of us needs to develop ourselves. The first is we need everybody to get AI literate. We need people to recognize they've got to learn about this stuff. It doesn't mean they have to learn the technical bit if they're not a technical person, but they need to understand something about it just in the same way that we need to read and write. But even more difficult than that for many people is the fact that we've got to now work on our own intelligence. We've built these AI tools and they're very smart. Have we spent as much time working on our own intelligence? Maybe not. We need to start fostering and developing our own intelligence so that we become ever more intelligent. This is the moment when we need to really power boost our intelligence, and start working out what that means. You know, what does it mean to power boost our intelligence? What do we want to be able to do in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? What's this is about? Rather than just worrying about the technology, I feel a lot of the conversations around AI at the moment are about the technology, which is understandable, but I want to talk more about the people and the human intelligence, and what the fact that we've got these tools means for us, and how we can become much, much, much more intelligent because we have these tools, if we use them right.
Well, I can give you another example. Reading and writing. With the use of technology, we can see, and that's something that is statistically proven, that the ability to read and write, because our children are using, keyboards and stuff, reading and writing by hand is deteriorating.
Yes.
And as you say, it's like with the artificial intelligence, if we indeed can, we can actually use the voice versus that transforms our voice into written text. Like right now, after this call, we will have a text file which will actually codify and write down everything we said. As a result of that, well, we will have it can actually deteriorate. The ability for reading and writing is deteriorating because of the use of digital tools in general, not necessarily AI. So that's certainly is a risk. I could imagine any other, let's say, data. It's something that at least at the level of European Union we discuss quite a lot, which is to what extent learning institutions, and especially companies that chase profit, can actually store data about our learning achievement or learning achievement of our children. Is that something that is actually at risk here, or we can just move on and we can just agree that this is going to happen?
I think we've got to be really careful. The whole area of ethics when it comes to artificial intelligence, and particularly when it's being used in education, often with younger people, it's something we've got to think about very, very carefully. And part of the ethical dilemma that we need to deal with relates to data. And so, yeah, we have to make sure that we adhere to the data regulations that already exist, and they're different in different parts of the world. But certainly we need to know that we've given permission for our data to be used. We need to know that we know how it's being used, who's using it, that it's being stored securely so that other people can't get hold of it. I think we need to...
I will challenge you here. How about this?
Go for it.
You are given this permission every time. How is that so? You have a mobile app, right? And when you're installing an app, you just have to fix one small thing over there, and you never have time to read what is it that says.
Read the terms and conditions. I know none of us have time.
Otherwise, you don't have access to this.
Yes.
And so the challenge is that we might be giving the consent without even knowing we are giving the consent. Nowadays our phones, they perfectly know our location. They perfectly know if you have an app on fitness. They perfectly know your heartbeat, your number of steps you take. Whether you're doing sports, all kinds of things about your daily routines. that currently are being stored somewhere. How is that referring to education then? Isn't that a risk? Because you see,
I think it is a risk. I mean, yes, I do. Data is hugely important, and it can be incredibly useful to us as educators for helping us to understand our students better, to support them better. It can be important for us as individuals to understand ourselves as a learner or as a sports person or whatever. But you're right, we hand over our data very easily. We rarely read the terms and conditions. And even if we did, do we really understand what it is they're doing? Do we really understand? Is that informed consent? Really? I'm not sure it always is. And that's where regulation becomes so important. But I think it has to be a combination of regulation and education, because the technology will always be a step ahead of the regulation. And there'll be always be people out there who want to do harm, who will also be a step ahead. So we have to help people through good regulation, but also help people to understand more what they're doing. It's a bit like the discussion we had a little earlier about we'll lose some of our cognitive skills and abilities if we don't use them. I think and we might then make the decision that actually some of them we're okay with that. We're happy to lose that, but we need to explicitly know that that's what we're doing. I think with the data situation, we need to get to a place where perhaps we do sometimes say, okay, I know I haven't read those terms and conditions, but I understand enough about what this kind of technology does. I'm okay with that. And I recognize that I'm losing this. But we're not in that place at the moment. I think there's lots of challenges when it comes to data, how it's talked about, how companies use it, and don't always explain clearly what it is they're doing with that data. It's a really difficult area, and there's many people with much smarter brains than mine, working on this, trying to devise the right kind of regulation. But you're right to point it out as an area of concern. I think it is an area of concern. I would personally like to get to a place where people felt much more ownership of their data, saw it as part of what they do, managing their data. Maybe they'll employ somebody else to manage their data, but again, they make that explicit decision. In the UK, there's a concept called a data trust that I'm very interested in. And a data trust is a bit like an ordinary trust. You have people who are well-respected, knowledgeable, expert, who are trustees, and they manage people's data rights. So if I feel that I'm not quite sure that my rights are being observed, I can say, okay, I'm happy for the data trust to look after my data rights with respect to this activity or that activity. So I think there are some interesting ideas being pursued, and over time, I'm sure there will be some good answers coming about. But at the moment, we don't have some of those things. So it is a difficult situation. There's no question about it. And I think a lot of people don't even realize what they're giving away when they acknowledge those terms and conditions without actually looking at them carefully. So I think it as I said earlier, we're in a very uncomfortable position at the moment, because there's a lot of unpredictable things happening. There's lots we don't understand. It's moving quite quickly. There are risks, without doubt. We're not quite sure how they're going to be mitigated. So it's a very difficult space at the moment.
Right. You see, I think that I think you mentioned that earlier. It's that there's a significant need for enhancing the literacy of parents and children about the digital tools that we have at hand, about let's say the media as well, but also the data that we have and that we are giving away. Because the thing is that informed choice is necessary here. Why is that so? Because most of us, I'm a person who I was already a grown up. when I set up my Facebook account. Facebook, I was back then, I was studying in the UK, and I was the first person. I was the first person among my group of friends that was having Facebook. Why? Because it actually emerged when I was in the UK and it was not available in Poland yet. Rose, welcome back. You're still in Taiwan. Thanks a lot for taking the time for the second time. Last time we had a challenge with our connection. We had, like, I think, a wonderful discussion just a day ago. Now this is the second attempt to do this, and the second try. Hopefully the connection will be stable.
I hope so.
I hope so too. So look, we finished our discussion a little bit about the evolution of the teaching profession and the teaching itself. We spoke a little bit about will AI transform the way we teach? Because I was giving this example of the fact that we used to use blackboards and chalk, later on whiteboards, later on PowerPoint presentations, and so on. But pedagogy didn't change. But you mentioned just a day ago, just yesterday, that that AI will change the way we teach. And I wanted to start with that, just to close this discussion. How do you think that the teaching profession will change with respect to the emergence of AI? What will teacher do with the use of AI? And how will the role of the teacher in the classroom change because of that?
Such a good question. Yes, I think teachers will, over time, become more proficient with using AI and find it useful for doing some of the work that perhaps doesn't use the greatest part of their skills and expertise as a teacher. I think AI will also help them to save time. I think it will also help them to understand more about their students and how the students are learning. It'll be an assistant, and I'm sure over time teachers will learn to leverage that AI assistant so that it's the most useful it can be to them. How will their roles change? I think is a really interesting question. I think the role will change as the nature of what we teach changes towards the greater emphasis on higher order thinking skills, on being the most intelligent people we can be, and using the subject disciplines, the areas that we traditionally teach as the medium through which we help learners develop these advanced thinking and learning skills. So I think the role of a teacher could become more exciting, actually, as they have more tools available to them. They have more opportunities to really extend their students' thinking, as well as to use their expertise in whatever area of study they have that particular knowledge expertise. So I think there's a reason to think that if we get it right, the role of the teacher could become more satisfying. Of course, it does depend on making the right decisions now about the way that AI is developed and recognizing the fact that we need to think very carefully about what it is we want students to learn through our education systems. What's going to prepare them best for the world that will inevitably be full of AI technologies?
Correct. Speaking of teachers, I often discuss with institutions that employ teachers, and because of that reason, they always, one of the nightmares they have to face is the question of the shortage. So somehow the teaching profession is in many countries is sort of not considered attractive for different reasons. Some of them could be salary in some countries, and others could be the social status. In others, it's really about the fact that it's a flat profession and somehow it's not valued. So there's many reasons for it. But some of my colleagues that are working in those institutions, they are asking me this question: can digitalization and the use of AI address or confront or diminish the the shortage question. Can really AI solve the question of the shortage of teachers in the profession?
It's a really good question. Again, yes, I think AI can be enormously helpful. I think we have to be careful not to think in terms of AI replacing teachers. But if we have students who have no teacher at all, then an AI teacher is better than no teacher. So I think we can certainly help to address some of the situations where we have students with no teachers at all. I think we can also help to ameliorate some of the challenges of teacher shortage by helping teachers to cope with their workload more effectively. So enabling them to offload some of what they're doing to an AI, very carefully offload it. I think, we do need to make sure that whatever the AI does, it's stuff that, it's tasks rather than stuff. It's tasks that would be better done by an AI or could be well done by an AI, not the kind of thing that really should remain with the human teacher.
Right.
So I think it can help, but we do have to be careful that it's not just seen as a teacher replacement, because AI will never be able to do all the things that a human teacher can do. And if we get it right, then there'll be more time for human teachers to do the things that are uniquely human in building those important relationships with students. And the AI helps to enable them to have that time for that quality interaction with students.
That's correct. I think we just discussed this just earlier within this talk, that it's also about discovering what should be the relationship between us and the AI, and that's partly later on could be transformed into what do we teach, how do we teach, and what is it we want, of this, let's say, this relationship between humans and artificial intelligence to be, and therefore what aspects of being human we want to be taught by the teachers, and what things or skills, competences we can actually teach with respect to AI. Now, lots of policymakers have a challenge here about the privatization of the education. So more and more education somehow becomes a commodity. Why? Well, because in many ways it's about signaling your skills. It's about the fact that you're getting a certification of your skills, competences, and attitudes that later on you can use in the labor market. And of course, education plays that role. But the question is here, how can we, especially in the area of AI, because of course schools do not develop AI. They don't develop those algorithms. They don't store data. How can we really ensure, or maybe we don't want to, but what is this relationship between, corporations or organizations that are profit chasing and education being considered as a public good? Can we find a common denominator here? Is there a way to collaborate between these formal education providers, schools, universities, and, let's say, edtech companies that more and more enter into the sphere of education?
That's a hard question, because I think there is a lot of activity within the educational technology space, particularly from large corporate organizations, that I don't always feel is necessarily in the interest of education. And it would be great if educators had a much stronger voice in what's happening with respect to some of the AI and edtech developments that we see more and more. So I think we have to find a balance. I would say that a lot of edtech companies are very keen to work with teachers and want to engage with teachers and want to create collaborative relationships. I think there's a huge value in educators being involved in the way educational technology is designed to try and ensure that the technology that's made available to them really does what they want and what they need. So I think there's a great opportunity for collaboration, but I do worry that in the case of some of the very big tech companies, there's a veneer of collaboration, but I'm not entirely sure that it's authentic. And I think we should be concerned to make sure that educators' voices don't get lost in the way that these technologies designed and rolled out at scale. So it's really important for educators to be part of that conversation, which means they do need to understand enough about what the technology does and can do. And they need to be given the opportunity to have a voice in the conversation about how it should be used within an education system.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, I think it's all about, certain dialogue there. And of course,
yes,
the worry of the formal education providers is that somehow there will be a newcomer, let's call it this way, on the business side, a newcomer to the market, and we will be swept away. And the entire purpose of school or education will be somehow swept away. It partially, the line of competition between formal education provision and edtech companies, that really happens at this point, at least, in adult education. In adult education, where you have the micro credentials, where you have actually the higher education and those small, let's say, courses that are specialized in professional development. So it's really professional development courses there. In there, this competition already takes place. In the school context, not so much yet. And I think that one thing that a corporation cannot provide, and it's never going to be interested in providing, is the care. And I think
yes, absolutely.
The COVID-19, we did some studies in around 2022 about what did people value about education, because there was a moment in the time of COVID that education became so high on the agenda, and suddenly we've been seen, right? And what we discovered was it was not really about what we teach, but it was about the care. And that's something that I think the companies cannot really provide. They can provide tools, but the care is not there. The place where
I agree.
You can put your children while you go to work, and this is something they would never be interested in doing. Now, a little bit about the students. Before I have like two more questions for you. Something about the students. I think I just read in the news. I think it was one of the Scandinavian countries. I will guess. I would not, cut my hand on it, but or put my head on it. If that's an English expression. I believe Denmark has recently decided to use ChatGPT as a pedagogical method or pedagogical tool. So, in other words, they started to kind of allow the usage of that in their education sector. And Denmark is an interesting case because they were, over the years, they were really crazy about digitalization. And I remember, because I know people that manage education there. I've been working around with them for some time. And they told me that a couple of years ago, they decided to go back from this digitalization. And they actually established an obligatory day without the using of digital tools. Because they were having, everyone was having a tablet, everyone was having a computer, and everything was really in. But they established an obligation that every school should have at least one day that they don't use anything related to screens, keyboards, and stuff like this. And now we hear they want to be using ChatGPT. And many of us are worried. I'm an academic as well, and I'm worried to what extent I can really properly assess my students, and how could I really make sure that it is not the ChatGPT and AI work. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's inevitable that students will use ChatGPT, and I think embracing it is probably the most sensible route to take. And then thinking about how you design assessments where the use of ChatGPT doesn't disable you from knowing what the student has done themselves. The use of ChatGPT should enable the student to do even better. And the expectation is that they should produce something that's even better than they could have produced without it. And I think we need to think very carefully about what we're assessing, because if we look at it candidly, if an AI that doesn't understand anything that it writes, has no conception of how the words that it produces relate to the real world, can pass our assessment, then maybe there's something wrong with the assessment, because it's not really assessing knowledge and understanding. And isn't that what we really want to assess? So I think it is a call to rethink how we assess and what we assess, and then to feel anxious about ChatGPT. Of course, there is another aspect to this, and that is we would need to make sure that all students have access to ChatGPT if we're going to say it can be used. And that's another area that needs to be considered.
Right. I think, you see, Denmark is one of those countries where digital tools are widely used, and in fact, all the Scandinavian countries, they went through COVID very well. In those countries where the digitalization process was not in place, that was a significant challenge. But in those countries, Scandinavian, Nordic, that was they were really well prepared for that. And it's actually quite surprising that they decided to establish this day, the Danes establish this day without digital tools, for the sake, because they kind of saw the negative aspects as well of this. So
it makes sense.
That's indeed true. I very much like your comment about assessment and rethinking how we assess, because indeed it's not really about checking the knowledge. Knowledge is available, and you can find it. And in fact, ChatGPT can create notes that you can use.
Yes.
But it's more about how you apply it rather than how, what you know and what you found out. So maybe indeed we have to just rethink the assessment.
Yeah.
So just, Rose, just to sum this up, I would be again provocative here. I would say, will AI destroy education or will it enhance it? What would be your take on it? And this is also a question for our viewers here. Tell us what you think. Comment on this, because this is a very hot topic. And that, now I'm going to give the floor to our guest. So, Rose, will it destroy education? Will it enhance it? Will there be a struggle between education providers and corporations that build AI and want to enter that space?
I think it's not going to be a comfortable ride. I think there will be some struggle, but I think in the end, AI will enhance education. We can't let it destroy education, and I am sure we won't, but I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it is going to be challenging and it will take time. But I have enough confidence that there are people who care very deeply about education and that they will make sure that we do protect what it is to be an educator and to be educated, and make sure that we maintain that high quality human interaction as a core part of what it means to be educated. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be easy, but I do think in the end we will find a way for AI to enhance education.
A piece of good news at the end. We will prevail after all.
I hope so.
So, Rose, thanks a lot. It has been a very inspirational talk. We did it I think in two pieces, because we did have some challenges with respect to the connection, but honestly, it was a pleasure to have you with Education Chatter. To our viewers, I wanted to thank also for seeing this. If you like what you see, please subscribe. You can then, of course, get notifications about our next movies. And once again, Rose, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for calling us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Taiwan. And
yes,
and honestly, it was really a great pleasure to meet you. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Daniel. It was a great conversation. Thanks so much.